The rancher's solitude. The wind rattled the loose boards of the corral, moaning like some half-starved coyote caught in a snare. Jonah McGraw leaned against the fence rail, hat low over his brow, watching the Mustang inside kick dust into the reddening sky. His hands, scarred and strong, rested heavy on the wood, the weight of years pressing down. The horse reared once, wild and defiant, then stilled, its dark eyes burning back at him. Jonah did not move. He simply breathed, slow and steady, like a man used to waiting for storms. From the far trail, the echo of wagon wheels rose against the hush of the prairie. He turned his head, the leather of his duster creaking with emotion. A speck moved along the horizon, sun glare flickering off something ironbound. His chest tightened. The advertisement had been posted weeks ago in town. A cook, someone to keep his house from falling to rot, his meals from turning to ash. He'd near forgotten the thought of any answer. Yet here came the sound of a wagon, and with it, the pull of something he'd sworn he no longer needed. Company. Dust lifted behind the slow cart as it climbed the rise, horses straining under the late-day sun. Jonah stepped away from the corral, boots sinking into the baked earth. Each step was deliberate, the ground crunching like brittle bone beneath his heels. The wagon halted in front of his porch, its wheels groaning, the horses blowing hard. From the seat, a figure climbed down. Black dress, travel-stained but neat. A hat pulled low against the wind. No ranch hand's daughter, no rough-faced drifter. A woman, slender but firm in her movements, set her boots to the ground with quiet certainty. She lifted her head, and Jonah caught the glint of her eyes, gray as storm clouds, steady as a drawn gun. "You, McGraw." Her voice carried without strain, clear over the restless wind. Jonah nodded once. "That's me." She came closer, skirts brushing against the dry grass, the dust settling around her like a shroud. When she stopped before him, she set down a small trunk, the kind that held all a life could be reduced to. "I'm Evelyn Harper," she said. "I came about the post." Jonah studied her jaw tight. He had expected broad shoulders, calloused hands, a girl raised in dust and dirt. Instead, here stood a widow. He knew the look. The black band on her sleeve, the careful practiced control in her stance, the way her fingers lingered on the handle of that trunk as if holding the last weight of someone gone. "You'll find this place is rough," he said finally, voice deep, low as thunder rolling off the mesas. "Ain't much but work, and more work after that." Evelyn's gaze did not waver. "That suits me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the restless shuffle of the wagon horses. Jonah turned, walking back toward the porch. His boots hit the steps with a hollow sound. He gestured behind him without looking. "Then come inside." The house smelled of wood smoke and old dust. The boards groaned beneath their weight, and the windows rattled at each gust of wind. Evelyn paused in the doorway, eyes sweeping the dim room. The bare table, the stove gone cold, the chair pushed back as if a man lived alone and moved without thought. Jonah set his hat on the peg by the door and watched her. "You cook?" he asked. "I cook," she said simply. He grunted. "Then the kitchen's yours. You'll find the pantry lean, but there's flour, beans, salt pork." She set her trunk against the wall, unbuckled her gloves, and crossed to the stove. Fingers brushed the iron, testing the cold. She opened the lid, peered inside, then began setting pans straight without waiting for him to speak. Jonah stood, arms crossed, watching her move with quiet assurance, the room already shifting around her presence. Outside, the Mustang screamed and kicked against its pen. Jonah's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to her. He said nothing. She said nothing. Only the scrape of iron against what filled the air. Later, when the sun dropped low, Jonah stepped onto the porch again. The desert stretched endless, the horizon bleeding red into black. Coyotes called in the distance, thin and sharp. He drew on a cigarette, the match flaring brief against his face, then fading into the dark. Behind him, through the open window, drifted the faint clatter of pans, the hiss of water on iron, and a smell he had not known in years. Bread rising, meat simmering slow. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, The weight of solitude lifted. But across the plain, another sound carried. A horse at full gallop, distant yet urgent. Jonah's head turned, eyes narrowing. He caught only a fleeting shadow against the dying light, then nothing. The wind swallowed a whole. We stepped back inside. Evelyn looked up from the stove. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, her hair pulled back loose, her face lit by the fire's glow. Jonah did not speak of what he'd heard. He only sat at the table, hands clasped tight, and waited. The meal came simple: beans, cornbread, a strip of pork crisp brown. Jonah ate without hurry, the taste grounding him. Evelyn ate little, quiet, her eyes always searching, as though measuring the walls, the windows, the doors. "You've lived alone long," she said suddenly, her voice soft but certain. Jonah looked up, startled by her forwardness. He chewed once, swallowed. "Too long." She nodded, as if that were answer enough. Then, after a long pause, she added, "I know what it is to lose a house to silence." The words landed heavy between them, as solid as the wood table beneath their hands. Jonah's jaw tightened. He did not ask her meaning. He did not need to. The fire popped, sparks drifting up the chimney. Outside, the wind fell still. Jonah leaned back in his chair, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat where it hung on the wall. Evelyn sat across from him, hands folded, her face calm, her gaze unbroken. And in that silence, deep as the desert night, the story that had been waiting all along began to take root. The widow's fire. The storm broke without warning. Rain hammered the tin roof. Wind drove grit through the cracks of the shutters, and the chimney groaned with each blast. Evelyn held the window, fast with both hands, shoulders straining as the hinges rattled loose. Jonah's voice cut sharp through the din. "Hold it steady." He shoved against the door, the gale trying to rip it clean off the frame. The ranch shook under the fury, lantern light swinging wild across the room. The Mustang screamed from the corral, hooves pounding the mud. At last, the squall eased, leaving only the drumming rain. Jonah stepped back, chest heaving, hat soaked through. Evelyn lowered the shutter, her palms red from splinters. She turned, hair damp, dress clinging to her frame, and in her eyes burned not fear, but a hard light. "You need stronger boards," she said simply. Jonah gave a grunt, half amusement, half respect. "Ain't wrong." Through the open window, the storm's tail swept across the desert. Lightning forked over the mesas, each strike throwing the land into stark relief. Evelyn stood watching, arms crossed. Jonah studied her in the lantern glow, the set of her jaw, the steadiness in her stance. Days passed. Work filled them. Evelyn rose before dawn, smoke already curling from the chimney by the time Jonah saddled the horses. Bread cooling on the windowsill, stew bubbling in the iron pot. Yet she was no ordinary housekeeper. He saw in the way she split wood with clean, unhesitating strikes. The way she rode fence with him, skirts tucked, rifle balanced across her lap. The way her eyes searched the horizon, never resting long in one place. One evening, as the sun bled low, Jonah found her by the well. She leaned against the pump, face lifted to the dying light, gray eyes distant. He stepped close, the boards of the porch groaning under his boots. "You've handled a rifle before," he said, voice even, no question in it. Her gaze lowered to meet his. For a long breath, she said nothing. Then, softly, "I have." Silence stretched. The cicadas screamed from the sagebrush, wind carrying their endless cry. Evelyn's hands, still on the pump handle, tightened. "My husband," her voice caught, then steadied. "He was cut down by raiders. He fought till he bled dry, and I pulled the rifle from his hands when the fire took the house. I ran with our boy. The trail was cruel. Too cruel." She stopped. Jonah did not press. Her shoulders stiffened, and she turned away, jaw locked. "You lost yours too," she said finally, not as question, but as knowing. Jonah's eyes darkened. He gave only a nod, slow, deliberate. The night deepened. Coyotes sang from the rimrock, sharp against the hush. Evelyn pushed from the pump and walked past him, skirts brushing his leg, the smell of rain still clinging to her. Jonah remained, staring after her, every ghost in his chest stirring. It was the following week the whispers reached them. A rider from town, hat bent low, came pounding into the yard. He slid from his horse, dust plastered to his face. "Redden boys," he spat, voice hoarse. "Hit the Kearney place yester son. Took cattle, burned the barn. Left the old man hangin'." Jonah's jaw flexed. His hand fell unconsciously to his belt, where no gun hung. The rider glanced at Evelyn, as if only then realizing a woman stood beside him. She didn't flinch under his stare. "They'll come this way," the rider warned. "They always do. Folks in town say if McGraw still has it in him, he's the one can stop him." Jonah's eyes cut cold, and the rider faltered, muttering a quick farewell before spurring off. Dust swallowed horse and man. The silence after was heavy as stone. Evelyn turned to Jonah. "You've got their measure?" His face hardened, shadows carving deep lines. "Had it once. Then you'll take again." Her voice carried no doubt. Jonah shook his head. "That life's buried." Her gaze didn't soften. "Burying doesn't mean it stays dead." That night, when the lamp burned low, Evelyn stood at the table cleaning Jonah's old revolver. He froze in the doorway, watching her hands move with quiet precision, oiling the cylinder, checking the sights, snapping it shut with a click that echoed through the room. "You'll need it," she said without looking up. Jonah stepped closer, eyes fixed on the gun in her grip. "You handle that better than most men. I was taught to survive." She lifted the weapon, tested the weight, then laid it flat on the table between them. "And I will not run again." Her voice cut sharp, final. Jonah stared down at the revolver, the ghosts of his past swirling in the steel. Outside, the desert lay quiet, but in that quiet lived the promise of fire yet to come. Ghosts of the gunfighter. The cattle bawled in the night, a restless, panic sound. Jonah jolted awake, hand already reaching for the rifle propped against the wall. Evelyn was at the window, curtain drawn back, her gray eyes fixed on the dark. "They're out there," she whispered. Jonah moved beside her. A glow flickered on the far ridge, orange, wavering. Another ranch burned. The smell of smoke carried thin on the wind. "They're coming closer," Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, but her jaw was set tight. Jonah's throat worked, a muscle ticking in his cheek. He let the curtain fall and turned away, shoulders drawn broad and heavy. At dawn, he saddled the gelding and rode into town. Dust clung to him as he tied off at the hitch rail. The main street was near silent, shutters drawn though the sun stood high. A few men lingered near the saloon, whispering, their eyes shifting as he passed. One spat in the dirt, muttering low. Thought McGraw was dead already. Jonah stopped. His boots ground against the grit. Slowly, he turned his head, gaze cutting cold. The man dropped his eyes quick, but the words lingered in the air. Jonah moved on, steps measured, each one echoing against the emptiness. Inside the general store, he bought powder, shot, sacks of beans. The keeper avoided his stare, hands trembling faint against the counter. When Jonah laid down his coins, the man finally spoke, voice hushed. "Word is, Redden's aim to take your spread next. Folks reckon if you stand, maybe they'll think twice. But you stand alone now." Jonah gathered his supplies in silence. The floorboards creaked under his boots as he left. Back at the ranch, Evelyn was splitting wood. She swung the axe clean, each strike sharp as a gunshot. Sweat streaked her temples, but her rhythm never faltered. When Jonah rode in, she paused, pushing hair from her brow. "They know your name?" she said. Jonah dismounted, eyes hard. "They knew it before. You'll need to sharpen it," she replied. She leaned the axe against the block and walked to the porch, her steps certain. The Reddens don't spook easy, but men like that, they bleed. Jonah's stare lingered on her, searching. She met it without flinch. That night, the table between them was heavy with silence. The revolver lay polished, gleaming under the lamp. Evelyn's hands moved over it again, checking the cylinder, testing the trigger. Jonah sat opposite, a bottle at his elbow, eyes fixed on the steel. "You think I should take it up again?" he said at last. "I think you already have," Evelyn answered. His jaw flexed, but he said nothing. She leaned forward, her voice low, sharp as a blade. I buried a boy because I ran. I'll not bury another man because he hides from himself. The words struck deep. Jonah's fist clenched against the table, knuckles white. For a long while, the only sound was the ticking of the lantern. Then slow, deliberate, Jonah reached across and drew the revolver toward him. At dawn, he rode with Evelyn to the canyon. Rocks rose high, sun barely cutting through. He set bottles on the fence rail, the glass catching fire in the light. Evelyn loaded the Colt, handed it to him. "Show me," she said. Jonah's hand hovered, then drew, smooth, faster than breath. The cracks split the morning. A bottle shattered. Another. Dust puffed as his boots shifted, his body moving with an old rhythm that had never truly left. Evelyn watched, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When he emptied the cylinder, silence pressed in. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her voice came steady. "The quick is still in you." Jonah lowered the gun, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "Quick don't keep a man alive. Steel does." Evelyn stepped forward, lifted her rifle. In one clean motion, she fired, splintering a bottle at 50 yards. She reloaded without pause, chamber snapping shut. Another shot, another bottle gone. She worked with calm precision, no wasted breath, no wasted motion. Jonah stared, and something in his chest shifted. "You ain't just a cook," he said. "No," she replied, smoke drifting from the barrel. "I'm a woman who learned to fight after losing everything. Same as you." The days pressed on, each one heavier than the last. Riders passed on the far ridges, scouts watching. Smoke rose again from the horizon. Another ranch turned to ash. The Reddens were closing in. One night, a rider came hard into the yard, horse lathered. Jonah stepped from the porch, hand on the revolver, now riding at his hip. The man slid from the saddle, eyes wide, voice ragged. "They're comin', McGraw. Reddens say they'll light your place by week's end. Told folks they'll hang your name on the wind." Jonah stood silent. The rider looked from him to Evelyn, her figure steady in the doorway, rifle balanced in her arms. The man swallowed hard. "You'll fight." Jonah's gaze cut to Evelyn, then back to the rider. His hand rested firm on the revolver's worn grip. "Reckon we will," he said. The rider spurred off, dust and thunder fading into the dark. Evelyn stepped to Jonah's side. For the first time, their shoulders touched, and neither pulled away. "The storm's near," she murmured. Jonah nodded. His eyes, hard and cold as steel, held the horizon. And the desert wind carried the promise of blood, the showdown of legends. The thunder of hooves shook the ground before the sun broke the horizon. Jonah stood on the porch, revolver hanging low at his side, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. Evelyn crouched at the window, rifle braced against the sill, her breath steady, her finger resting light on the trigger. The Redden gang swept over the rise, dust boiling behind them, shouts rising wild. 10 men at least, guns glinting, faces cruel under the dawn light. Their leader rode tall in front, coat flapping like a black flag, mouth curled in a grin that promised fire. "McGraw," he bellowed, voice carrying across the plain. "Your time's done. We'll take your land and lay your bones in the dirt." Jonah stepped forward, boots heavy on the boards. "Come take it." The gang charged. Gunfire cracked, sharp and fierce. Bullets tore into the siding, splinters flying. Evelyn's rifle answered, a clean shot. One rider tumbled from his saddle, dirt swallowing him whole. She chambered another round without pause, breath unbroken. Jonah's revolver roared, flames spitting from the barrel. A man fell screaming, clutching his chest. Another veered wide, horse thrashing. The yard filled with smoke, the air thick with the stench of powder and sweat. The Reddens wheeled and circled, firing wild, their voices a chorus of rage. Evelyn shifted to another window, rifle steady, each shot finding its mark. Jonah moved from porch to corral, fast and sure, the old rhythm alive in his blood. Every draw was smooth, every shot true. The whispers in town had been right. The quick was still in him. But the fight pressed hard. A bullet tore across Jonah's shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve. He staggered, teeth clenched, then steadied, firing again. Evelyn saw him falter and rose higher in the window, drawing the fire toward herself. The glass shattered around her, shards cutting her cheek, but she did not flinch. She fired again, dropping the man who'd winged Jonah. The gang pulled back, regrouping near the ridge. Their leader rode to the front, raising his pistol high. His voice carried, raw and sharp. "Burn it down. Leave no stone standing." They charged again, faster, louder, guns blazing. Jonah braced himself against the corral, revolver steady, blood dripping down his arm. Evelyn stepped from the house, rifle lifted, skirts torn and stained. She stood tall in the open yard, wind whipping her hair, her face hard as stone. She fired, reloaded, fired again, each motion clean, relentless. Men toppled from their saddles. Horses screamed. Dust churned under the chaos. Jonah fought beside her, his revolver barking until the chamber clicked empty. He drew his second pistol, hands moving with the speed that had once carved his name into legend. The fight raged, close now, brutal. One outlaw leapt from his horse, charging Jonah with a knife. Jonah swung the revolver, steel cracking against the man's skull, dropping him cold. Evelyn turned, rifle but slamming into another raider who rushed her, then finished him with a shot at point-blank range. When the smoke cleared, only 3 Reddens remained. They wheeled their horses, circling, eyes wild. Their leader snarled, teeth bared. He raised his pistol, sights set on Jonah, who stood bleeding, chest heaving, gun nearly empty. The shot rang, loud, final. But it was not the leader's bullet. It was Evelyn's. Her rifle cracked clean and sure, and the man jerked back, eyes wide, before falling hard to the earth. His body hit with a thud that silenced the field. The remaining outlaws froze. Their leader lay still in the dirt, his pistol dropped, his mouth slack. Evelyn lowered her rifle, smoke curling from the barrel. Her gaze swept the yard, sharp, unbroken. Jonah stood, chest rising heavy, eyes fixed on her. The quick was still his, but the legend, he knew now, belonged to her. The 2 surviving Reddens turned their horses and fled, dust trailing behind them, their shouts fading into the horizon. Silence rolled in heavy and deep. The yard was littered with bodies, smoke still drifting, the smell of blood thick in the air. Evelyn lowered the rifle and walked to Jonah's side. Her face was streaked with sweat and dust, her cheek cut, but her eyes burned steady. She reached out, pressing her hand against his bleeding shoulder, steadying him. He looked at her, a long, heavy look, and in his gaze was not surprise, but respect. Reverence. The wind carried the quiet now, soft across the plain. The ranch still stood. Jonah's voice came low, rough. "You healed this place." Evelyn's lips parted, a faint, weary smile breaking through. "No, we healed it." The sun broke the horizon then, spilling gold across the bloodied yard, casting long shadows over the bodies, over the house, over the 2 who remained standing. And the story, as it would be told, was born in that light. How a rancher sought only a cook, but found instead a widow whose fire burned brighter than death, whose aim was true, whose heart carried steel enough to make the desert remember.